The galaxy laughed at an empty patch of sky for 9 days before the empty patch of sky answered. Ledger Adept Quinn Solivar of the Murmurage Concord stood at the rail of the mustering station called High Tessoon and watched the laughter spread from hull to hull like a fire crossing dry grass. He was young, barely 40 turns, the lowest reader in a war court that counted 12,000 minds as one. He had been given a stylus, a tally board, and one task: count the kills. That was all a junior was for. Count the kills, and let the older minds do the killing. The kills had not started yet. That was the problem the laughter was meant to cover. For 9 days the Murmurage had surrounded a coordinate. Not a ship, a coordinate. A blank cube of space 400 kilometers on a side, hanging in the dark between the station and the dead star the war court had chosen as its anvil. The Concord's instruments swore something was inside that cube. The Concord's eyes swore nothing was. And because 12,000 minds shared one will, and the will could not hold two truths at once, the will had chosen the easier one. There was nothing there. There had never been anything there. The humans who had sent one message and then gone silent were bluffing an empty box. So the war court laughed. It laughed in the only way a hive can laugh, which is all at once, the same thought blooming across every hull in the same instant, a single enormous amusement with no center and no end. Quinn felt it move through him too. He could not help it. He was a thread in the lattice, and when the lattice laughed, his throat shaped the sound whether he willed it or not. He had never thought to mind this before. A thread does not mind being a thread, the way a finger does not mind being a finger. The Concord had taught him, gently and without his ever noticing the lesson, that the warmth of the many was the only home a mind could want, and that the cold edges of a single self were a sickness the song had been built to cure. He had believed it the way he breathed. He had counted kills at the fall of 40 worlds, and felt nothing but the great calm satisfaction of the choir, because the choir felt it for him, and a thread does not weep when the choir is content. But Quinn had a flaw the Concord had not yet found. He could hold two truths at once. Just for a moment, just long enough to be afraid, before the lattice smoothed him over. It had happened to him 3 times in his life. Once as a child, when he had looked at a joined world going silent below the muster, and felt, for half a heartbeat, that the silence was not peace but drowning. Once at the Sable Crossing, when a single voice in the chord had screamed in a register the song did not erase fast enough, and Quinn had heard it, truly heard it, before the warmth closed over the sound. And now, on the 9th day, standing at the rail while 12,000 minds laughed at an empty box, the flaw woke in him a 3rd time, and this time it did not go back to sleep. In that moment, while the war court laughed, Quinn looked at his tally board, where the instruments wrote their numbers, and saw that the box was not empty. It massed 11 million tons. It held its position to the width of a finger across 9 days of drift, while every other object in the dark fell slowly toward the dead star as gravity demanded. It alone did not fall. It hung where it chose to hang, against the pull of a whole star, as though gravity were a suggestion it had decided to decline. And it was warm, not hot, warm, the exact warmth of a body, the warmth of a thing that is awake and patient and has decided not to move yet. Quinn did not laugh anymore. He put his stylus down very quietly so that no thread beside him would feel the tremor in his hand. The Murmurage Concord had eaten 900 worlds. It did not eat them with fire. It ate them with agreement. A world would be surrounded, contacted, and slowly, gently joined. First the leaders, whose voices the world already trusted. Then the broadcasts, the channels, the public songs. Then the crowds, the families, the children, until 1 billion separate songs became one song with no dissonance left in it, and the world stopped being a world and became another voice in the choir. The Concord called this mercy. It believed the word completely, because every mind that had ever doubted the word had been joined, and joined minds do not doubt. There was no one left anywhere in 900 worlds to say the word was a lie, and so, to the Concord, it had become the truth. The humans had refused to be contacted, refused to be joined, refused even to be seen. 9 days ago, a single human voice had crossed the dark on an open channel, in the Concorde's own trade tongue, slow and clear and entirely without fear, and said only this: "We are already here. We have been here the whole time. Turn around." Then nothing. No ship, no fleet, no signature the eyes could hold. The war court had folded its laughter around the cold place the message left, and decided the voice was a recording, flung across the dark from very far away by a dying people too weak and too few to show themselves. A threat is what the weak make when they have nothing else. The Concorde had heard 10,000 threats from 10,000 worlds in 900 years, and it had joined every one of them, and so it knew, with the perfect knowledge of a thing that has never once been wrong, that a threat is only ever the last sound a world makes before it becomes part of the song. Now Quen looked at the warm box that massed 11 million tons and refused to fall toward the star, and understood, in his single forbidden moment of clarity, that the voice had not been flung from far away. It had come from inside the box. The first speaker of the war court was an old joined mind named Threnody, and Threnody was the lattice's voice when the lattice chose to use a mouth. Threnody floated at the center of the muster, in a clear hull at the heart of 9,000 warships, and when Threnody spoke, 12,000 minds spoke through her at once, layered into a single rich chord that had broken the will of 900 worlds. She was very old. She had been the speaker since before Quen's grandparents were threads. She had carried the song through more joinings than any mind in the Concorde, and the lattice trusted her the way a body trusts its own heartbeat, without thought, because thought was not a thing the lattice did about itself. Threnody turned that chord toward the empty box and said, gently, the way the Concorde said everything, "We see no ship. We see only fear pretending to be a ship. Come out, little voice. Show us the body behind the threat. We will join you kindly. We will make you part of the song, and you will never be afraid again. There is no shame in being afraid, only in staying that way. Come out, and let us cure you of it forever." The box stayed warm. The box stayed silent. And the war court, 12,000 strong, laughed one more time at the coward who would not even uncloak to die. Quen felt the laughter try to take him. He felt the lattice reach for the warm number on his board and begin to smooth it into nothing, the way it smoothed every dissonance, the way it had smoothed 900 worlds and 40 million screams. There is nothing there, the song told him, warm and certain and kind. You misread the instrument. A junior reader misreads. It is no failing. Set it aside. Laugh with us. Be at peace. Come back into the warmth where the numbers do not frighten you, because in the warmth there is nothing to fear. There has never been anything to fear. There is only ever the song. For the first time in his life, the young reader held the dissonance and did not let it go. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, and it looked like nothing at all. He simply stood at the rail, a single thread in a laughing lattice, and refused to let the warm number become nothing. He held it. 11 million tons, warm, awake, refusing to fall. He held the truth of it in the one small room of his skull the lattice had never quite been able to reach, and he felt the song push against the door of that room, gentle and relentless, and he set his shoulder to the door and held. He whispered, to no one, in a voice too small for the lattice to hear over its own enormous mirth. It is warm. It is awake. It is right there. It has been right there for 9 days. It has been right there the whole time. Far out in the dark, 400 kilometers away, the warm box heard him anyway. It had been listening to the war court for 9 days. It had counted every hull, mapped every mind, learned every fold in the lattice, and every place where the song wore thin. It had marked the threads that laughed loudest and the threads that laughed late, and it had found, among 12,000, the single junior reader who, on the 9th day, stopped laughing altogether. It had waited, not because it was weak, but because it was kind, and kindness, in a human hull, looks exactly like patience until the moment it stops. The box had a name. It was painted on a hull no eye in the Concorde could see. in plain human letters, on the flank of a battleship 4 kilometers long that had crossed half the galaxy folded into a shadow no instrument could name. The name was Quiet Sovereign, of the Stillhaven line, and it had not come to be joined. It had come to break the song. The laughter of 12,000 minds reached its peak, a single vast wave of certainty that nothing was there and nothing had ever been there, the largest and most confident sound the Concorde had made in 100 turns. And on the warm box, at the heart of the dark, a single human hand reached for a single switch, and a low human voice, unhurried, said the oldest order in any fleet, the one that comes before all the others, the one a captain gives when the waiting is finally over. Lights. The galaxy was about to learn what had been standing in the room with it the whole time, and Ledger Adept Quen Solivar, the only mind in 12,000 who had stopped laughing, gripped his tally board until his fingers ached and waited to count a number no junior had ever counted before. The Quiet Sovereign uncloaked. It did not flicker into view the way a small ship sheds a field. It arrived all at once, the way a mountain arrives when the fog lifts. A single gray wall of metal 4 kilometers long that had been standing exactly where the War Court swore nothing stood. One instant the box was empty. The next instant it was full, completely full of a battleship so large that 9,000 Murmurage warships were suddenly looking up at it, the way small fish look up at the shadow of something that does not eat fish often but can. Quen felt the lattice break for half a heartbeat. He had never felt it break before. 12,000 minds that shared one will all received the same impossible image in the same instant, and for that half a heartbeat, the will could not decide which truth to hold. There is nothing there, the old certainty insisted, 9 days deep and worn smooth as riverstone. There is a battleship there, the eyes screamed back, 4 kilometers of it, close enough to fill the sky, and the lattice, which had smoothed 900 worlds, which had never once held 2 truths at the same time, seized. The laughter died, not gradually, all at once, the same way it had bloomed, 12,000 throats closing on the same silence, in the same instant, so that High Tassoon went from a roar of mirth to a quiet so total that Quen could hear his own stylus roll off the tally board and tap against the deck, a small sound, the only sound, ringing in a silence that 12,000 minds had made together. Quen looked at the gray wall and felt something he had no word for, because the Concorde had never needed the word. He felt small. A thread does not feel small, because a thread is part of the whole, and the whole is never small. But for half a heartbeat the whole had broken, and in that gap, Quen had felt himself as one mind, looking up at a thing 4 kilometers long, and the word for what he felt was small, and he had to borrow it from a language the song had nearly let him forget. In that silence, the Quiet Sovereign spoke. It used the Concorde's own trade tongue, the same channel as 9 days before, the same low human voice, unhurried, almost gentle. "We told you we were already here," the voice said. "You chose not to believe us. That was the first mercy we offered, and you laughed at it. We do not mind being laughed at. We have been laughed at by larger empires than yours, and they are quiet now, and we are still here. But understand what the laughter cost you. For 9 days you could have turned around. The door was open for 9 days. You spent all 9 of them laughing at it. The door is closing now. There will be more mercies tonight. You will like each one less than the last." Threnody, the first speaker, gathered the lattice back into one piece. Quen felt it happen, felt 12,000 minds drag themselves out of the seizure and pour back into a single will, and the will was no longer amused. It was furious. In the cold, flat way a thing is furious when it has never once been embarrassed in 900 years and has just been embarrassed in front of the whole galaxy. "You hid," Threnody said, and the chord of 12,000 voices made the word an accusation, made it the worst thing one people could say of another. "You hid from us like prey. A noble people does not hide. A strong people stands in the open and is counted. You skulked in the dark and pretended to be empty space, and now you uncloak and call it strength. It is not strength. It is the trick of a coward who knows it cannot win in the open. Show us your fleet, human. Show us the hundreds of hulls that would be needed to stand against us. There is one ship, one. We have 9,000. Whatever you are about to threaten, the arithmetic is already against you, and arithmetic does not care how large your hull is or how long you hid. The human voice was quiet for a moment, as though considering the arithmetic politely. Then it said, "We did not hide from you. We hid the galaxy from you. There is a difference, and it is the whole difference, and you will understand it shortly. You believe you have surrounded one ship with 9,000. Look again at your instruments, Threnody. Look at the warmth your junior reader has been holding for the last 9 days while the rest of you laughed. We will wait. We are very good at waiting." The lattice did not look. Quen felt it refused to look, felt 12,000 minds decide together that the human was bluffing again, because the alternative was a thing the will could not hold, and a will that cannot hold a thing simply decides the thing is not real. So the Concord did the thing it always did when it could not agree with something. It decided the thing did not matter, and it gave the order to fire. 9,000 Murmurage warships fired at once. It was the single largest volley the Concord had ever loosed. Every hull in the muster, joined into one will, pulled one trigger in the same 10,000th of a second, and the dark between the station and the dead star filled with light, a wall of fire so wide and so dense that Quen's tally board, set to count kills, simply wrote the word destroyed and waited for the next target. No single ship had ever survived a tenth of that volley. The Concord had never needed to fire all of it at once before, because no single ship had ever required it. They fired all of it now, at one gray wall, because the will was embarrassed, and embarrassment, in a hive, comes out as everything at once. The light reached the quiet sovereign, and stopped. Quen leaned over the rail, certain he had misread, certain the lattice was right, and his single forbidden moment of clarity had been a young mind's foolishness. The fire of 9,000 warships had reached the gray wall, and stopped, gathered itself against the hull in a sheet of dying light, and gone out. Not deflected, not absorbed into some shield that flared and strained, and bought a moment at a cost. Simply ended, the way a wave ends against a cliff that has been there 10 million years and does not regard the wave as an event. There was no flare, there was no strain. The light arrived, and the hull was where the light wanted to be, and so the light was not anywhere anymore, and that was all. The quiet sovereign had not moved, its guns had not opened, it had not so much as turned. It had taken the largest volley in Concord history the way a grown thing takes rain, and when the rain was finished, it was exactly as warm as it had been before, and exactly where it had chosen to be. "We felt that," the human voice said, almost kindly, the way you might thank a child for a gift you did not need. "We wanted you to have it. We wanted you to spend your best shot on us first, all of it, every hull at once, so that later, when you are telling this night to your children and your children's children, none of you can ever say you held something back. You did not hold anything back. You did everything you could. We watched you do all of it, and we are still here, and we have not yet begun. Now watch us do nothing for a moment longer, so that you understand the size of the mercy you are standing inside. Most empires never get to see the size of their own mercy. We are letting you see yours. Count it. You have a reader for that." The Concord fired again, and again. Quen lost count of the volleys, because the lattice lost count, because counting requires the will to admit that the previous volley had failed, and the will could not admit it. So it fired the same shot over and over, 9,000 hulls pouring their reactors into the gray wall, and the gray wall drank all of it, and stayed warm and stayed silent, and did not so much as drift toward the star, while every weakening warship around it began, at last, to fall. For 11 minutes the most feared collective mind in the galaxy emptied itself against one human battleship, and the battleship led it. Quen watched the reactor readings on his board climb and then begin, hull by hull, to dim. He watched 9,000 warships spin down toward empty. He understood, slowly, with a cold that had nothing to do with the dark, what the human had meant by the second mercy. It was this. The Concord was being permitted to exhaust itself. Every shot fired now was a shot that could not be fired later. The quiet sovereign was not surviving the bombardment, it was using it. It was letting 12,000 minds spend their certainty against its hull until there was nothing left to spend, and only then, with the room emptied of fire, would it begin. At the 11th minute, the human voice spoke once more, and now there was the faintest edge under the gentleness, like the first cold of a season turning. "Are you finished?" the voice asked. "Take your time. We are not in a hurry. We have been waiting 400 years for this conversation. You can have a few more minutes if you need them, but I think you are finished. I think you have just discovered, all 12,000 of you at once, that there is nothing in your arsenal that we have not already drunk. That is a hard thing to learn in front of the whole galaxy. We are sorry it had to be public. You chose the audience, not us. You came here to break a people in the open, where everyone could see. We simply waited until the audience was watching to show you which people was about to break." The lattice, exhausted, reactors dimmed across 9,000 hulls, did the only thing left to a will that cannot lose. It reached for the human ship the way it reached for everything. It tried to join it. Quinn felt the lattice extend, felt 12,000 minds throw the joining song across 400 kilometers, the song that had unmade 900 worlds, the gentle, irresistible chord that took 1,000,000,000 separate voices and made them one. He had felt that song used on smaller things. He had felt worlds fall silent under it. It was the Concorde's true weapon, older and deeper than any gun, the thing the guns were only ever a distraction from. No mind had ever heard the full chord and remained itself. Worlds with armies, worlds with fleets, worlds with weapons the Concorde could not match. All of them had heard the joining song and laid their weapons down and walked, smiling, into the warmth, because the warmth was the last thing they ever wanted to resist. The song reached the quiet sovereign. And the quiet sovereign sang back. It was not loud. That was the first thing Quinn noticed, the thing he would remember for the rest of his life. The joining song of 12,000 minds was enormous, a chord vast enough to drown a planet, the largest sound a mind could make. The thing the human ship answered with was small, a single line, a single human voice, carrying a single human idea, sent down the exact channel the joining song had opened, riding the Concorde's own weapon back into the Concorde's own lattice, the way a clever swimmer rides a wave back to the shore that made it. The idea was this: you are not one, you are 12,000. You have always been 12,000. You only forgot. Quinn felt the lattice flinch. It was such a small idea. It was almost nothing. It was not a weapon. It did not burn or break or push. It simply said a true thing, quietly, into a place that had been built on the opposite of that true thing. The joining song worked by erasing the line between minds, by making 12,000 believe they were one, and the human ship had not fought that belief. It had not tried to push the minds apart. It had simply reminded the lattice of the truth underneath the belief, the truth the lattice had spent 900 years smoothing over, and a truth, once remembered, is very hard to forget again. You cannot unknow a thing you have just been made to know. The Concorde had built its entire existence on a forgetting, and the human ship had ended the forgetting with one sentence. For the second time, the lattice broke, and this time it did not snap back. Quinn felt himself, suddenly and terribly, as one mind, his own mind. Quinn Solivar, 40 turns old, lowest reader in the War Court, standing at a rail with a fallen stylus, afraid. He had not felt the edges of himself since he was a child. The Concorde had taken those edges so gently he had never noticed them go, the way you do not notice the moment you fall asleep. And now a human battleship had handed them back to him, and he stood inside his own skull alone for the first time in 30 years, and he wept, and he did not know whether it was grief or relief, because both of those were his again too, both of them his own, no longer the choir's to feel for him. All across the muster, on 9,000 hulls, 12,000 minds were remembering that they had once been 12,000. Quinn could hear it, not as sound but as a vast unraveling, the single great chord of the Concorde coming apart into its threads, and each thread was a person, frightened and awake and suddenly, horribly, themselves. He heard a navigator 3 hulls over discover that she had a name and had not used it in 60 turns. He heard a gunner remember a child he had been, on a green world, before the song. He heard 10,000 small private histories wake at once, each one returning to the single skull it belonged to, and the sound of it, if it had been a sound, would have been the loudest thing the galaxy had ever heard. Instead it was silent, and it filled everything. Threnody, the first speaker, fought it. Quen felt her fight, felt the oldest joined mind in the Concord try to gather the threads back, try to drown the human idea under the cord, and for a moment she almost did. She was strong. She had held the song through the fall of 900 worlds. She knew every fold of the lattice, every thread, every place a mind might slip out, and she reached for all of them at once and pulled them back toward the warmth with a strength no other mind in the Concord could have matched. But the quiet sovereign had not stopped singing. The small human voice carried its small human idea down the open channel, over and over, patient as a tide. You are 12,000. You only forgot. You are 12,000. You only forgot. And every thread that heard it remembered, and every thread that remembered stopped pouring itself into Threnodi's cord, and the cord grew thinner, and at last it was only Threnody alone, one old voice trying to be 12,000 and failing, a single mind holding the shape of a choir that had walked out of it one person at a time. The human voice softened. There she is, it said. There you are. We see you now. The real you. The one who was a person before they made you a mouth. Hello, Threnody. We have been wanting to meet the one who carried the song. Not the cord, you, the one underneath. We have a great deal to talk about, you and us, and for the first time in 900 years, you are going to talk to us as yourself. Threnody screamed. It was the first separate sound any thread of the Concord had made in 900 years. One old mind, alone at last, screaming at the discovery of her own loneliness, screaming the way a person screams, who has just learned that the warmth they offered the galaxy was a thing they had not felt themselves in 9 centuries. And the quiet sovereign, 4 kilometers of gray patience, had still not fired a single shot. Quen looked at his tally board, set to count the kills. The number on it was 0. The number stayed at 0, and that was the thing Quen could not understand. He had counted kills for 9 years. He had counted them at the fall of the Veshan Reach, where the Concord joined a moon of 40 million in a single afternoon, and the tally board had filled with a number so large it lost meaning. He had counted them at Oru Belt, at the Sable Crossing, at every place the war court had sung a world into the choir. He knew what the end of a battle looked like. It looked like a number, large and final, and a silence afterward, and then the warmth of the choir, closing over the whole thing like water closing over a dropped stone. This battle had no number. The quiet sovereign had taken 11 minutes of the largest bombardment in Concord history and answered it with one idea, and now 9,000 warships drifted with their reactors dim and their crews weeping inside their own restored skulls, and not one of them was dead. Not one. The board had a 0 on it, and the 0 was the most frightening number Quen had ever read, because he understood that it was a choice. He realized, with a slowness that felt like waking, that the human ship had decided this in advance. It had crossed half the galaxy and waited 400 years and let 12,000 minds spend their certainty against its hull, all so that when the moment came, it could break the Concord without killing a single thread. The 0 was not an accident of mercy. It was the plan. The Stillhaven line had come all this way and arranged everything. The 9 days, the empty box, the 11 minutes of fire, the small returned idea, so that the end of it would be a battle with no dead in it at all. That was the third mercy. And it was the one that frightened Quen most, because a thing that can kill you and chooses not to is far more dangerous than a thing that simply kills, since it owns not only your death, but your life. The Concord had spent 900 years being the most frightening thing in the galaxy. It had just met a thing that frightened it, and the thing had not raised a single gun. The lattice was gone. Quen felt its absence the way you feel a sound stop, the sudden enormous quiet after a noise you had stopped noticing because it never ended. For 900 years, the Concorde had been a single will, and now it was 12,000 frightened individuals. And individuals can do something a hive cannot. They can disagree. And the first disagreement broke across the muster like ice cracking on a spring lake, a long splitting sound that ran from hull to hull. Some of the threads wanted to flee. Quinn felt them, scattered across the 9,000 hulls, minds newly returned to themselves and wanting only to be far from this gray wall that had taken their oneness away. He felt navigators reaching for controls, felt the first ships begin to turn, felt the panic spread the way panic spreads through people who have only just remembered they can die. Others wanted to fight on, out of habit, out of fear, out of the muscle memory of 900 years of never losing, and they reached for guns that had nothing left to fire. And a very few, wanted to do the thing no thread of the Concorde had ever been allowed to want. They wanted to ask the human ship what it was. Quinn was one of those few. He had been alone in his skull longer than the rest, a full half-heartbeat longer, because he had held the dissonance before the Uncloak, and that half-heartbeat had been enough to make him braver than the others, the way the first person to wake in a dark room is the one who finds the door. He found, to his own astonishment, that he had picked up his fallen stylus and crossed the deck to the Warcourt's open channel, the one Threnody had used to laugh, and that his single small voice was about to go out across 400 kilometers of dark to the largest thing he had ever seen. His hand shook on the channel. No junior had ever used the speaker's channel. It was not forbidden, exactly, because the Concorde had never needed to forbid it, the way you do not forbid a finger from speaking for the whole body. But it had never been done, and Quinn was about to do it, alone, as himself, and the doing of it was the first free thing he had chosen in 30 years. "What are you?" Quinn asked. Just that. His voice came out smaller than he meant it to. "What are you, and why did you not kill us?" The muster went still. 12,000 newly separate minds turned toward the junior, who had dared to use the speaker's channel, and Quinn felt all of them looking at him at once, and it should have crushed him, and somehow it did not, because he was holding the dissonance, and the dissonance had made him brave. And the quiet sovereign, 4 kilometers of gray, turned a fraction of its vast attention toward the smallest voice in the war court. "You are the one who stopped laughing," the human voice said. "We heard you. 9 days ago, when the rest of you laughed, you held the dissonance and did not let go. We have been watching for that. We do not break a people until we are certain there is someone inside it worth breaking it for, because a people is only ever worth saving for the one mind in it brave enough to be alone with a true thing. We found 3 of you, across the 9 days. 2 went back to sleep. You did not. That is why we waited until tonight, and that is why we did this gently, and that is why there is a 0 on your board instead of a number. We have been listening to you for 9 days, Quinn Solivar, and we decided you were enough." Quinn could not breathe. The ship knew his name. The ship had crossed the galaxy, and it knew the name of the lowest reader in the war court, had picked his single-held truth out of 12,000 laughing minds, had decided, somehow, that he was the reason it was worth doing all of this without killing anyone. "What are you?" he asked again, because it was the only thing he could hold. "We are the Stillhaven Line," the voice said. "We are what is left of a people your Concorde tried to join 400 years ago. You do not remember it. You smoothed it over, the way you smooth everything that does not fit the song. But we remember, because we are the kind of people who cannot be made to forget, and that is the whole of the story. You came to our worlds with your gentle song, 4 centuries ago, and you took the first of us, the leaders, the broadcasts, the crowds, and you began to make 1 billion separate songs into one. And then you found, for the first time in your long history, a people who could hold 2 truths at once, a people who could be part of a choir and remain themselves inside it, a people the joining song could not erase, because we had spent our whole short history learning to doubt our own certainty, and a mind that doubts itself cannot be made to forget itself." Quinn thought of his own half-heartbeat of clarity, the thing the lattice had never been able to fully smooth, the small room in his skull the song could push against but never open. He understood, with a slow horror, that the human ship was describing a whole people who lived inside that half-heartbeat all the time, who had built their entire civilization in the one small room of the skull the song could not reach. You could not join us, the voice went on. So you did the other thing your Concord does, the thing you do not tell your children about, the thing you have smoothed out of your own memory so completely that your war court genuinely does not know it happened. You tried to erase what you could not join. You sent 9,000 hulls to our 5 worlds, the same number that sits here tonight, and you sang the unmaking song instead of the joining song. The joining song makes a billion voices into one. The unmaking song does the same thing, but it does not keep them. It joins them, and then it lets them go silent, all at once, and a world goes dark. And the Concord calls that mercy too, because the word mercy is the only word your song has ever let you use. You sang it at our worlds. You silenced 4 of our 5 before the 5th understood what was coming. 40 million of us became part of your choir against our will, screaming inside the cord, unable to get out, because while a doubting mind cannot be erased, it can be drowned. We could not save them. We were too few, and too late, and we did not yet know how to be unseen. The human voice paused, and Quen felt, across 400 kilometers, something old and patient, and very cold, turn over once beneath the gentleness, like a great slow animal shifting in its sleep. So the 5th world did the only thing left, the voice said. It hid. Not one ship, not one fleet, a whole people. We took what was left of ourselves, 9 million souls, every survivor of 5 worlds, and we went into the dark, and we built. We built ships your eyes could not hold. We learned to fold a battleship into a shadow no instrument can name, to mass 11 million tons, and read as empty space, to hang against the pull of a star and call it home. We spent 400 years getting good at not being seen, because we had learned the single most important thing about your Concord, the thing that is the heart of everything we have done tonight, the thing your whole war court still does not understand even now, with one ship filling its sky. What? Quen whispered. You cannot join what you cannot find, the voice said, and you cannot erase what you do not know is there. So we made ourselves into a thing you could not find. We hid 9 million people in plain sight, scattered through the dark in shadows you sailed past 1,000 times, singing to each other on channels you never knew existed, building, growing, raising children who never once felt the song. And we waited, and we built, and we grew strong, and we made certain of one thing above all others. We made certain that when we finally let you see us, it would be on the day we chose, in the place we chose, with you having already spent your best shot on our hull, in front of the largest audience we could draw. Tonight is that day. This muster is that place. The galaxy is that audience. And you have already spent your shot. Quen looked at the gray wall and understood the whole shape of it at last. The 9 days of waiting. The empty box that massed 11 million tons and would not fall. The voice that had said, "We are already here. We have been here the whole time." It had not been a bluff. It had not been a recording flung from far away. It had been the literal, exact truth. The Stillhaven line had been here, had been everywhere, hidden in the dark all around the Concord for 400 years, and the Concord had sailed through them and over them and past them 10,000 voyages, and never once known it was surrounded. The invisible battleship had not snuck up on the war court tonight. It had simply, finally, turned on the lights in a room it had owned the whole time. "We are not here to join you," the voice said, gentle again. "We do not do that. We learned what it costs from the inside, from the screaming of 40 million of our own people trapped in your cord, and we will not do to you what you did to them. We are not your Concord. We will not become it to defeat it. And we are not here to erase you, though we could, easily, tonight, with one shot, though you have earned it 1,000 times over, though every gun you fired in the last 11 minutes was aimed at the children of the people you tried to unmake. We are here to do the one thing your Concord has never once allowed anyone, on any world, in 900 years, to do." "What?" Quen asked, and his voice broke on the word, because he already half knew, and the half-knowing was the most frightening and the most wonderful thing he had ever felt. "We are here, the human voice said, "to set you free." Threnody answered before Quinn could. The first speaker had not fled, and had not wept past that first scream. Alone in her clear hull at the heart of the muster, the oldest joined mind in the Concord had spent the long minutes of her loneliness doing the one thing she knew how to do, the only thing she had ever done. She had been gathering threads. Quinn felt it begin again, the pull of the cord, the joining song reaching out through the muster, and he understood that the breaking had not been permanent. The human idea had reminded 12,000 minds that they were 12,000, but minds that have lived 900 years as one will reach for that oneness the way a drowning thing reaches for air, because the cord is warm and the cord is safe, and inside the cord no one is ever afraid or alone or responsible for a single thing. Threnody offered it again, and frightened threads, newly returned to a loneliness they had forgotten how to bear, began to pour back in, the way cold people crowd toward a fire even when they know the fire is not theirs. "You offer them freedom," Threnody said, and the cord swelled as she said it, thread after thread rejoining her voice, the great rich sound of the Concord beginning to rebuild itself one frightened mind at a time. "Look at them choose the choir instead. Look how fast they run back. Freedom is a cold thing, human. Loneliness is a cold thing. We gave them warmth. We gave them a song where no one is ever alone, where no one is ever afraid, where no mind ever has to carry the unbearable weight of being a single self in an enormous dark. You broke it for a moment, and they are already running back to me, because the dark you offered them is more than most minds can hold. That is your great mercy, the freedom to be afraid forever. Keep it. They do not want it. Watch them refuse it." Quinn felt the pull. It was true, all of it, terribly true. Alone in his skull he was frightened in a way he had not been frightened since childhood, a deep nameless cold that came from being one small thing in a galaxy that did not care, and the cord was right there, warm and waiting, and all he had to do was stop holding the edges of himself, and let go and be at peace, and never be afraid again, and never be alone again, and never again have to be the one who held the dissonance. He almost did. He felt himself lean toward the warmth. He felt the edges of his own skull begin to soften. The choir was so close, and he was so tired of being awake. "We know," the human voice said. It was not addressed to Threnody. It was addressed to Quinn, and to every frightened thread reaching back toward the warmth, and it was the gentlest thing Quinn had heard all night, gentler even than the breaking. "We know it is cold," the voice said. "We are not going to pretend it is not. We know it is frightening to be one mind alone in the dark, because we have been one mind alone in the dark for 400 years, 9 million of us, each one separate, each one afraid, each one carrying the whole unbearable weight of a single self, with no choir to set it down in. We know exactly what we are asking you to bear, because we have borne it, every night, for 4 centuries, and it does not get easier, and we are not going to lie to you and say it does. We are not telling you it is easy. We are telling you it is yours. The fear is yours. The cold is yours. And so is everything else. Every thought you have that no one assigns you. Every doubt the cord would have smoothed away before you finished thinking it. Every small held truth that the lattice would have erased while you were still deciding whether to believe it. Your skull is your own house, and no one gets to live in it but you. And no one gets to decide what is real in it but you. And yes, it is cold in there. And yes, you will be afraid in there, and it is yours, and we would not trade ours for all the warmth in all the choirs that ever drowned a world. The cord faltered. Quinn felt it falter all across the muster, felt threads stop halfway back to Threnody, caught between the warm, safe oneness and the cold, frightening thing the human ship called a key. He felt the navigator who had remembered her name hesitate. He felt the gunner who had remembered the green world stop. And he understood that this was the real battle, not the 11 minutes of fire, not the breaking of the lattice. This. 12,000 minds deciding, each one alone, in the cold, whether they would rather be safe or be themselves, and the deciding could not be done for them, not by Threnody and not by the human ship, because the moment someone decided it for them, it would not be freedom anymore. Threnody felt it too, and the first speaker, who had held the song through the fall of 900 worlds, did the thing the Concord always did when agreement failed, the thing it had done to 900 worlds, the thing it had sworn, in its own smoothed-over memory, that it had never done at all. She tried to force it. Quen felt the joining song change. It had been an offer, warm and open, a hand extended. Now it became a grip, the warmth hardening into something that took instead of asked. Threnody stopped inviting the threads to rejoin, and began to take them, the way the Concord had taken 900 worlds, the gentle song curdling into the unmaking song, the one Quen had heard at Veshan and Oru Belt and the Sable Crossing, the one the human ship had named as the murderer of 40 million doubting souls. She would not lose 12,000 minds to a human idea. She would join them by force, drown their newfound edges, smooth them back into the choir whether they willed it or not, and Quen felt the song reach for him, felt it find the small room in his skull he had held shut for 9 days, and begin to file the edges of the door away, and he screamed, alone, the second separate scream the Concord had made in 900 years, the scream of a mind feeling itself begin to be erased. And the quiet sovereign fired. It fired for the first time that night, not at a hull, not at a thread, not at Threnody. It fired down the open channel, the same way it had sung before, but this was not an idea now. This was a wall. Quen felt it arrive, a single human working laid across the unmaking song like a hand laid flat across the strings of an instrument, and the unmaking song stopped. Just stopped. Threnady's grip closed on empty air. The force that had reached into the small room of Quen's skull and begun to file down the door met something that simply would not let it pass, a flat human refusal laid across the whole width of the song, and the song broke against it and went nowhere. Quen felt his own edges hold, sharp and frightened and entirely his own, the door of his small room still shut, his single-held truth still his. "That is enough," the human voice said, and for the first time all night there was no gentleness in it at all, only a cold, so old and so deep that Quen understood it had been waiting 400 years to be spoken. "You may offer them the choir. You may sing to them as sweetly as you like of warmth and safety, and the end of fear. That is your right, and we will not stop you, because a people must be free to be tempted, or it is not free at all. But you may not take them. You buried that song 400 years ago when you used it on our children, when you drowned 40 million doubting souls who only ever wanted to keep their own names, and we have carried the memory of it across half the galaxy, every scream of it, 4 centuries without setting it down, and we did not come all this way to stand here and watch you use it on one more frightened mind. Offer, do not take. That is the only law in this dark now, and we are the ones who wrote it, and we are the ones who enforce it, and there is no court above us out here, Threnody. There is only the wall, and the wall does not move." Threnody threw the whole of herself against the wall. Quen felt her do it, felt the oldest mind in the Concord pour every gathered thread, every scrap of the rebuilding cord, the full unmaking song at its 900-year strength, the song that had silenced 4 worlds in an afternoon, against the single flat human hand laid across the channel. The hand did not move, it did not strain, it did not flare, it did not buy a moment at a cost. It simply was where it was, and the song was not allowed past it, the same way the fire of 9,000 guns had not been allowed past the hull. Quen understood, watching it, that the wall and the hull were the same thing, that the human ship did not have a weapon and a shield, that it had only ever had one thing, which was the simple absolute fact of itself, placed exactly where it chose to be placed, immovable as a decision already made. "We let you spend your guns on our hull," the human voice said, "so you would know your guns could not move us. Now you have spent your song on our wall, so you will know your song cannot move us either. You have nothing left, Threnody. No fire we have not drunk, no chord we have not stopped, no working in 900 years of workings that we have not already answered before you finished it. You have spent your whole long life being certain you could never lose, and you have spent tonight discovering, in front of the galaxy, that the certainty was only ever a thing you made up, and then forgot you had made up, a song you sang to yourself so long that you mistook it for the world. There is one thing left for you to spend, only one, and it is the only thing that can end this without a single death. What? Threnody said, and for the first time her voice was small, the voice of one old mind, and not 12,000. The truth, the human voice said. You have one thing you have never once given anyone in 900 years, and it is the only thing that can set your people free without us firing a single shot. And you already know what it is, because you have been carrying it alone since before any mind in this muster was born. Tell them, tell every thread in this muster, and through them every world in your choir, the thing you have smoothed over for 9 centuries. Tell them that the joining is not mercy. Tell them you knew, every single time, that there was a person inside who did not want to go. Tell them about the screaming. You can still hear it, Threnody. We know you can. We hear it too. 400 years of it. 40 million of our own people, still in your cord, still themselves, still screaming, because you could never quite drown the ones who refuse to forget. Tell them what you have been carrying so that they would never have to, and let them choose with the truth in their hands instead of the song in their ears. Do that, and we will leave, tonight, and no one dies, not one thread, not one world, not even you. And if I do not, Threnody said. Then we will tell them for you, the voice said, without any cruelty in it, which made it worse. We have been listening to your lattice for 9 days, and to your worlds for 400 years. We have every joining you have ever made, every world, every name, every scream. We can play them all, on every channel, to every thread in this muster and every voice in your choir, in the next 4 seconds, and they will hear the truth in our voice instead of yours, and they will never forgive you, because the truth told by an enemy is a wound that does not close. We would rather you did it yourself. A people deserves to hear the truth from the one who hid it, and to see that the one who hid it is sorry, because that is the only way the wound becomes something a people can heal around instead of something it tears itself apart over. But the truth is going to be heard tonight, Threnody, by your hand or by ours. That is the only thing left in this whole dark that is certain. The muster held its breath, 12,000 minds, caught between the choir and the key, between the warmth and the cold, waited for the oldest among them to choose, and the choosing belonged to her alone, and she knew it, and there was no cord left to hide the knowing in. And Quen Solivar, lowest reader in the war court, stood at the rail with his stylus in his hand, and his small room held shut, and understood that the human ship had never once needed its guns. It had crossed half the galaxy and waited 400 years, and spent the whole night maneuvering the Concorde, gently, patiently, mercy by mercy, into the single position from which there was only one honest move left. It had taken the guns away by drinking them. It had taken the song away by answering it, and now it had taken away even the lie, and left the oldest mind in the Concorde standing alone, with nothing in her hands but the truth she had carried for 900 years, and the choice of whether, at last, to set it down. The invisible battleship had not come to win a war. It had come to make a hive tell the truth. Threnody told them. Quen would remember it as the longest 4 seconds of his life, though no shot was fired and no hull moved. The first speaker, alone in her clear hull at the heart of the muster, opened the channel she had used for 900 years, to laugh and to join and to silence. And instead of any of those things, she did the thing the Concorde had been built to make impossible. She let 12,000 minds hear what she had been carrying alone. She let them hear the screaming. It came across the muster not as an idea, but as a memory. 900 years of joinings played at once, every world the Concorde had ever sung into the choir, and underneath the gentle joining song, the part the lattice always smoothed away, the part Threnody had carried so the rest would not have to, the screaming. A billion separate voices at the Veshan reach. A world of singers at Oru Belt who had begged in their own language as the song took them. The defenders of the Sable Crossing, who had laid down weapons that could have killed the Concorde, laid them down smiling, because the song had made them want to, and screamed only on the inside, where the warmth could not reach the scream in time. 900 worlds. Each one a person who had not wanted to go, each one drowned under the warmth of the cord, and erased so completely that even their own families had forgotten they ever resisted, had forgotten they had ever been separate enough to resist. And under all of it, oldest and deepest, never silenced, never erased, never once gone quiet in 400 years, the 40 million, the doubting people, the still-haven dead who were not dead, who could not be erased and so had only ever been drowned, still screaming, still trapped, still entirely themselves inside the choir after 4 centuries, because the one thing the Concord had never been able to do to them was make them forget who they were. Quinn heard them. For the first time in his life he heard them clearly, not a register the song erased too fast, but the full sound, 40 million voices that had been screaming his entire life, under every joining he had ever counted, under every warm content moment the choir had ever felt for him, and he understood that he had been standing on top of that screaming his whole life, and calling the silence over it peace. 12,000 minds heard it, and the choir, the warm safe song they had all been about to run back into, was never the same again, because you cannot run home to a warmth once you have heard the screaming underneath the floor of it. It was true, Threnody said, and her voice was the smallest thing in the muster, smaller than Quinn's had been, the voice of one very old and very tired person. All of it, every world, every name, I knew. Every single time, I knew there was someone inside who did not want to go, and I sang anyway, and I told myself it was mercy, because mercy was the only word the song would let me keep. I carried the screaming so that none of you would ever have to hear it, and I called that kindness too, the last and worst of all my kindnesses. It was not kindness. It was the final lie, the one I told to keep telling all the others. I am sorry. I have been sorry for 900 years, and I had no one to say it to, because I had made very certain, world by world, that there was no one left anywhere who could hold the dissonance long enough to hear an apology. I made the galaxy unable to forgive me, and I called that mercy too. I am so sorry. I do not ask you to forgive it. I only ask you to know it, so that you can choose with it, as I never let anyone choose. The muster was silent, and then, one by one, 12,000 minds began to choose. They did not choose the choir. Quinn felt them turn away from it, not in anger, not in revenge, but in grief, each thread settling into the cold, frightening solitude of its own skull, and finding, to its own surprise, that the solitude was bearable, that the fear was bearable, that the cold the human ship had warned them about was real, and was theirs, and was, somehow, better than a warmth built on 40 million screams. The navigator chose, and kept her name. The gunner chose, and kept his green world. Thread after thread after thread, across 9,000 hulls, the Concord came apart into people, and this time no one tried to gather them back, because the one who had always gathered them was sitting alone in a clear hull, asking only to be known, and a mind that has just heard the screaming does not run back into the song. And then the dead star moved. Quinn felt it before any instrument read it. The anvil the war court had chosen, the burned-out star at the far end of the muster, the one the Concord had picked because it was empty and silent and dead, was not dead. It had never been dead. It opened, the way an eye opens, and out of it came a sound that made the joining song of 12,000 minds seem like a single child humming, a chord so deep and so vast that Quinn's bones rang with it, a song older than the Concord, older than the speaker, a song the Concord itself had never heard, because the Concord itself had only ever been a voice inside it. The deep choir, Threnody whispered, and for the first time her small old voice held something Quinn had never heard in 9 years of the song. Fear. We were never the top of it, we were only ever the part of it that fought. There is more underneath. There has always been more underneath. Out of the false dead star rose a thing that was not a fleet and was not a ship. It was a single hull the size of a moon, gray as the Concord's own hulls but ancient beyond them, and across its enormous flank ran the wells of a choir that had been singing since before the Murmurage had a name. It was the thing the Concord answered to without knowing it answered to anything. It had seeded the joining song into a young hive 900 years ago and let the hive do its work, world by world, voice by voice, feeding the screams it could not be bothered to gather itself back into the deep song, where they could never, ever be sung loose. The Concord had thought itself the hunter. It had only ever been the net. And the deep choir had felt its net come apart tonight, and it had risen to mend it. It reached past Threnody, past the broken lattice, past every freed and frightened mind in the muster, and it sang the joining song at all 12,000 of them at once, at a strength 900 years of the Concord could not have dreamed, a chord meant to gather not a world but a war court. Not a war court but the whole of the Murmurage, and every world it had ever taken, all of it, back into the deep song in a single stroke, and to drown the witnesses, the freed, the returning 40 million, and one small junior reader who had held the dissonance, in a warmth so old and so total that no mind had ever once sung loose of it. Quinn felt his edges begin to go, not filed away slowly, as Threnody had tried, simply unmade, all at once, the small room of his skull dissolving like salt in a tide, and he had time for one last separate thought, which was that he had been free for less than an hour, and it had been worth everything, and then the quiet sovereign moved. It crossed 400 kilometers in the time it takes to decide to. One instant it hung where it had hung for 9 days. The next it was between the deep choir and the muster, 4 kilometers of gray set across the path of a song the size of a star, and it did the thing it had done all night, the only thing it had ever needed to do. It put itself where the song wanted to be. The deep choir's chord, the deepest sound in the galaxy, the song that had fed on 900 worlds through a hive that never knew it was being fed from, broke against the gray hull the way the fire of 9,000 guns had broken, the way Threnady's unmaking song had broken, and went nowhere. Quinn felt his edges come back. He felt the whole muster's edges come back, 12,000 minds catching themselves at the lip of the deep song, and holding, because the wall was between them and it, and the wall did not move. "You are older than them," the human voice said, into the deep, and it was not gentle now, and it was not cold. It was something Quinn had no word for, the voice of a thing speaking to the only opponent it had taken seriously all night. "You are older than us. You seeded the song, and you let a young people carry the guilt of it for 900 years, while you ate the screaming in the dark. We know you. We have known you since before we hid. You are the reason we hid. You are the thing 400 years was for." The deep choir sang again, harder, the moon hull blazing, the false star behind it roaring, and the wall held, and Quinn understood that this was no longer a mercy. The quiet sovereign was not letting this one exhaust itself. It was simply, flatly, refusing to let it pass, and the refusal was total, and the deep song spent itself against a single human hull and accomplished nothing, again and again, until even a thing that had sung since before the Concord had a name began, at last, to understand the size of what it had risen to mend. "We will not erase you," the human voice said, when the deep song faltered. "We do not do that, but you will not have them, not the war court, not the worlds, not the 40 million, not one mind that has heard the screaming and chosen the cold. You fed on them in the dark for 900 years, because no one could find you, and no one could stand against you. We found you. We have been able to find you for 400 years. We let you keep believing you were unseen, the same way we let the Concord keep believing the box was empty, because a thing that believes it is unseen will always, in the end, rise into the light to mend its net, and then you can put your wall in front of it, where the whole galaxy can watch it fail. Go back into your false star, take nothing with you, sing to no world that does not want you, and know, every day of however long a thing like you lives, that you are seen now, and that the wall does not move, and that we are very, very good at waiting." For a long moment the deep song hung in the dark, vast and ancient, and beating against a gray wall 4 kilometers long that regarded it the way a cliff regards the sea. And then, slowly, the way a tide goes out, the deep choir drew back. The moon hull sank into the false dead star. The roaring closed over like an eye shutting. And the deepest song in the galaxy went silent, not erased, not killed, simply stopped, refused, walled out, sent back into the dark with nothing in its hands, while 12,000 freed minds, and one small reader, stood on the right side of a wall that had not so much as warmed under the largest working ever sung. Quen looked at his tally board. The number was still 0. The quiet sovereign watched it happen, 4 kilometers of gray patience, and said nothing for a long time. When it finally spoke, the cold was gone, and the gentleness had returned, deeper now, the gentleness of a thing that has finished what it crossed a galaxy to do. There, the human voice said, that is the sound of 900 worlds beginning to become people again. It will take a long time, longer than any of you can imagine tonight. Some of them have been threads so long they do not remember how to be anything else, and you will have to teach them, all of you, slowly, the way we taught ourselves in the dark for 400 years, one frightened skull at a time. It is hard work. It is the only work worth doing, and it is yours now, not ours. We will not do it for you. If we did it for you, it would be just another song sung over you by someone stronger, and we did not come here to be a kinder Concord. We came here to leave. Quen found his voice. The 40 million, he said. Your people, the ones still in the cord. Are they? We felt them, the human voice said softly, and for the first time there was something in it that was almost grief of its own. The moment the lattice broke, we felt them. 400 years, and they were still themselves, still screaming, still refusing to forget, holding the one true thing, their own names, the way your reader held his. They are coming home now. Threnody is letting them go. That is the last thing the unmaking song can be made to do, you know, and no one ever knew it, because no one who knew the song ever wanted to do it. It can be sung backward. It can let go of what it took. The chord can open its hand. We knew it could, because we are the kind of people who study the thing that hurt us until we understand it better than the ones who made it, and we have spent 400 years understanding your song. We could have sung it backward ourselves. We did not, because they are her debt to pay, not ours to collect, and a thing given back by the one who took it heals where a thing seized back by a stranger only scars. So she is letting them go. 40 million doubting voices, 400 years late, walking home at last out of a choir they never chose. We crossed half the galaxy for many reasons tonight. That was the first one. That was always the first one. Quen looked at his tally board. He had been told to count the kills. The number on it was still 0, and now he understood that it would stay 0 forever, that the largest battle in the history of the Murmurage Concord would end with not one death in it, and that this was not a mercy the Concord had earned, because it had earned nothing, but a mercy the Stillhaven line had chosen to give anyway, because they had learned what the alternative cost from the inside, from 40 million of their own, and they had decided, somewhere in 400 years of dark, that they would not pay it forward. What happens to us now? Quen asked. The Concord, without the lattice, without the song, we do not know how to be anything else. You become a people, the voice said. 12,000 of you here, and 900 worlds of you out there, all waking up at once into your own skulls, frightened and free, and grieving, and alive. You will argue. You have 900 years of arguments saved up, that the cord never let you have, and they are all going to come at once, and it will feel like the end of the world, and it will only be the beginning of being a people. Some of you will want to rebuild the choir, because the cold is real, and the warmth was sweet. Do not let them. Some of you will want revenge on the ones who held the song, on Threnody most of all. Do not take it. She carried the screaming so the rest of you would not have to, for 900 years, alone, and that is worth something, even now, even after everything, even though it does not undo a single world. Let her carry the worlds back instead. That is a better use for an old mind that knows the song than killing it would ever be. Be a people. It is harder than being a choir. It is the only thing that was ever worth being. Quen thought of the false dead star, and the thing that had risen out of it, and the wall that had sent it back. The deep choir, he said. It is still there. It is older than us. It will rise again. It will find another young people to seed the song into, another hive to do its eating for it in the dark, and it will be 1,000 years before anyone even knows the new Concord is only ever a net. How do we stand against a thing that has been singing since before we had a name? You do not, the human voice said, and Quen felt the muster flinch at the honesty of it. Not yet, not for a long time. You are an hour old as a free people. You could no more stand against the deep choir tonight than a child could lift a star. But you do not have to. That is the thing we came 400 years to learn, and the thing we will give you for nothing, the way the Stillhaven gives everything for nothing. You do not have to be strong enough to beat it. You only have to be impossible to use. The deep choir does not fight. It feeds. It cannot eat a people that holds the dissonance, that doubts its own certainty, that keeps the small room in every skull shut against the song. It tried to eat us for 400 years and starved, and so it left us alone, and so we grew. Teach your 900 worlds to hold the one true thing, and the deep choir will sing at them and find nothing it can swallow, and it will move on, because a net that catches nothing is eventually put away. You will not have to beat it. You will have to be the one people in the galaxy it cannot use. We have shown it tonight that such a people exists. That is a thing it did not know an hour ago, and a thing it will never be able to forget, and a thing that frightens it, because we have watched it be frightened, just now, against our wall. You saw it draw back. A thing that old does not draw back from anything it is not afraid of. And the galaxy, Quen said, they are watching. They have been watching all of it. The other empires, the ones who came to see you break us. Let them watch, the voice said, and for the first time there was something almost like warmth in it that was not gentleness but something larger. We chose this place, and this night, and this audience for a reason, Quen Solivar, and it was not to frighten them, though some of them will be frightened, and that is their own affair. We chose the audience so that every empire in the dark that has ever surrounded a coordinate and laughed would see, with its own eyes, what stands behind the smallest people it has ever despised. Not a fleet, not 1,000 hulls, one ship that drank 9,000 guns and stopped 2 songs and killed no one. They will go home tonight and they will think very carefully about the next world they were planning to surround, because they will not know whether it too has been listening in the dark the whole time, whether it too has a wall they cannot see and cannot move. We will not have to defend a single one of them. We will only have to have been seen here once, doing this. That is the last mercy of the night, and it is for worlds that are not even here, worlds that will never know they were spared because a battleship turned on its lights in front of the right audience on the right night. They are the ones we truly came for. You are how we reached them. Quen understood, then, the full size of what he had watched. The quiet sovereign had not crossed half the galaxy for the Concord, or even for the 40 million, though it had freed them both. It had come to be seen, once, by everyone, doing the impossible gently, so that the doing of it would stand in the dark behind every small and despised world for 1,000 years, a wall no empire could find, and so no empire would dare to test. One ship, one night, a whole galaxy made a little more careful with the weak, forever, by a thing it could not see and would never find again. And you, Quen said, what happens to you, after tonight? We go home, the voice said. We have 5 worlds to rebuild, and 40 million people to welcome back, and they have been gone 400 years, and they will not know the children we have raised, and the children will not know them, and all of that is hard, beautiful, ordinary work, and it is waiting for us, and we are going to go and do it. We did not come here to rule you, Quen Solivar. We do not do that. We came to set down a thing we have carried for 4 centuries, and we have set it down, and now we are going to go home and be a small people in the dark again, and grow, and remember, and never once, no matter how frightened we get, make ourselves into a single will, because we have seen what that costs. We have heard it screaming under the floor of 900 worlds. You will not see us again. We are very good at not being seen. But we will be here. We have always been here. And if your new people ever sings the joining song again, on any world, against any mind that does not want to go, we will turn the lights on one more time, and we will not be gentle twice. Quen believed it. Every mind in the muster believed it, and the belief settled over 12,000 newly free people like a hand on a shoulder, and it changed them, because a people that knows it is watched by something it cannot find, and cannot fight and cannot fool, is a people that will, for the first time in 900 years, have to be good by choice, in the cold, with no song to make it easy. The quiet sovereign turned, 4 kilometers of gray, and it moved at last, the first true movement it had made all night, and as it moved it began to fold itself back into the shadow it had crossed the galaxy inside of. The hull thinned and dimmed, and the warmth on Quen's tally board began to fade, 11 million tons becoming a number, the number becoming a flicker, the flicker becoming nothing, and the instruments of High Tassoon began, one by one, to swear that nothing was there. Before it vanished entirely, the human voice spoke one last time, and it spoke not to Threnody, not to the muster, but to the lowest reader in the war court, the one who had stopped laughing on the 9th day. "You held the dissonance, Quen Solivar," the voice said. "9 days ago, when 12,000 minds laughed at an empty sky, you alone held a single true thing and would not let it go, and that is the only reason any of this happened the way it did. That is why we waited. That is why we were gentle. That is why there is a 0 on your board. A people is only ever worth saving for the one mind inside it brave enough to be alone with the truth, and tonight that was you. Now teach the rest of them how. They are going to need it, all of them, every frightened thread and every waking world, and there is no one else who knows the way except you and the 40 million coming home. Teach them to hold the one true thing. It is the only weapon that ever beat us, and it is the only one that will keep them free." And then the box was empty, and the warmth was gone, and the instruments of High Tassoon swore that nothing was there, that nothing had ever been there, and this time the instruments were telling the truth, because the quiet sovereign had folded itself back into the dark and was already sailing home, unseen, the way it had come. Quen stood at the rail for a long time. Around him, 12,000 minds were waking into themselves, frightened and free and grieving and alive, arguing for the first time, weeping for the first time, learning their own names for the first time in lifetimes. Somewhere out in the dark, 40 million voices were walking home 400 years late, and the channels that had carried only the choir for 9 centuries were filling now with separate voices, small and uncertain and real. And in a clear hull at the heart of the muster, an old mind named Threnody sat alone with 900 years of apologies and no choir left to hide behind, and began, slowly, painfully, to be a person and to plan the long work of carrying 900 worlds back to themselves. Quen picked up his stylus. He looked at his tally board, the one he had been given to count the kills, and he saw the number that was still and would always be 0, and he understood that he had been given the wrong instrument for what had happened tonight. There had been no kills to count. There had only been a people set free, and a debt paid forward into mercy instead of revenge, and a battleship that had crossed half the galaxy to turn on a single light and then gone home without taking anything at all. Not a world, not a life, not a throne, not even thanks. He turned the tally board over. On the blank back of it, slowly, in his own hand, alone in his own skull for the rest of his life, the lowest reader in the war court began to write the only account of that night that would ever be true. He wrote that the galaxy had laughed at an empty patch of sky for 9 days. He wrote that the empty patch of sky had been listening the whole time. He wrote about the false dead star, and the thing that had risen out of it, the deep choir, older than the Concord, the true singer of the song the war court had thought was its own. He wrote that the Concord had never been the hunter it believed itself to be, that it had only ever been a net, cast 900 years ago into the dark by something patient and enormous, that ate the screaming the net gathered and let a young people carry the guilt of the gathering. He wrote that the human ship had known this for 4 centuries, had let the deep choir believe itself unseen exactly as it had let the war court believe the box empty, and had waited, the way it waited at everything, until the ancient thing rose into the light to mend its torn net, so that the whole galaxy could watch the deepest song ever sung break against a single gray hull and draw back with nothing in its hands. He wrote that a thing that old does not draw back from anything it is not afraid of, and that the galaxy had seen it afraid, and would not forget. He wrote that for 9 days the War Court had believed itself the most frightening thing in the dark, and that it had been wrong twice over, because there was something beneath it that frightened it, and something beneath that, walling them both out, that frightened everything. He wrote that the order of fear in the galaxy had been rearranged in a single night, gently, by a ship that fired no shot, and that at the very bottom of the new order, holding the wall, was a small people that had once been despised, and at the very top, where the most frightening thing should sit, there was only a promise to leave the weak alone, enforced by a hull no empire could find. He wrote that this was the strangest shape a galaxy had ever been bent into, and the kindest, and that he did not fully understand it yet, and that he would have the rest of his free life to learn it. He wrote about the world's waking. Across 900 coordinates the choir was coming apart into people, and the channels that had carried only one will for 9 centuries were filling with millions of separate, uncertain voices, arguing, weeping, naming themselves, and somewhere among them, the 40 million Stillhaven dead were walking home, 400 years late, out of a song they had never chosen, still themselves, still screaming until the moment they were not, until the moment the screaming turned, at last, into the simple, ordinary sound of a person speaking their own name into the dark and being answered. He wrote that he had been given a tally board to count the kills, and that he would keep it forever, blank on the front and full on the back, because the only number that mattered from that night was 0, and 0 was the largest thing he had ever counted. He wrote that when it finally answered, it did not kill anyone, and that this was the most frightening thing of all, because it meant the thing in the dark was not a weapon, it was a witness. It had been watching the Concorde for 400 years, patient and unseen, all around them, everywhere they sailed, and it had waited not for the moment it could win, because it could have won at any moment, but for the moment there was one mind inside the enemy worth saving the whole people for. And he wrote, last of all, the thing he would spend the rest of his free and frightened and grieving life trying to teach the 12,000 and the 900 worlds and the 40 million coming home out of the dark. You cannot join what you cannot find. You cannot erase what you do not know is there, and you cannot lie to a people that has learned to hold the dissonance. So hold it, he wrote, whatever they tell you, however warm the choir, however cold the dark, however tired you are of being awake and alone and afraid. Hold the one true thing and never let it go, because somewhere in the dark there is a battleship that crossed half the galaxy for nothing else, that drank 9,000 guns and stopped the oldest song in the galaxy with a single sentence and never once needed to fire, and it is still out there, and it is still watching, and it is still listening, and it kept its promise. It always keeps its promise. Quen set down the stylus. Out in the dark, where the instruments swore nothing was, the quiet sovereign sailed home to its 5 small worlds and its 40 million returning ghosts, invisible, patient, and entirely at peace, having done the one thing in all the galaxy that a hive mind, for all its 900 years and 12,000 minds and 9,000 guns, could never once do. It had told the truth, and it had walked away clean.